So it's really brilliant, Hannah. Thank you so much for coming. Do you want to just give us an introduction to yourself?
Mm-hmm.
You're on.
Hello, everybody. So as we've kind of heard, my name's Hannah. I am an emotional health and wellbeing worker for children and young people in North Manchester. I'm married to Joe. We've been married for just over 3 years. And yeah, so that's everything about me, pretty much, that you need to know.
Thank you. So tell us, Hannah, what aspects of your background have influenced your mental health?
So to keep it brief, when I was growing up, I grew up in quite a volatile household. Both parents were dealing with quite severe mental health problems, which would kind of manifest themselves in different ways. It would come out as maybe abuse. It would come out as like emotional negligence, things like that. But that meant that growing up, I didn't learn how to deal with my emotions. I wasn't taught how to cope. I was actually taught to suppress how I was feeling, to appease my caregivers, because if I showed any emotion, it was, it wasn't good for them. It was an inconvenience for them. I would be punished. And so from a very, very early age, I wasn't allowed to feel. I wasn't taught that feeling was okay. And so I didn't know what to do with my feelings from quite a young age.
Okay, so that sounds like it really connects to what we were talking about earlier about some of the messages we received growing up about how we deal with our emotions and our mental health.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't even have a language for that, do we? It's almost like a foreign language, the language of mental health.
Yeah.
And so I understand from us getting to know each other and talking that there came a point where you were really struggling with your mental health.
Yeah.
I mean, what was that? What was happening for you? What did you start to notice?
So things kind of came to a head when I was about 15. So I'd gone through up to that point of my life. As I said, I kind of just got my head down, got on with everything. Didn't really know how to process my emotions or my feelings. And I got to about the age of 15 in school, so my last year of high school. And I was always quite a high achiever in school. I was in the top sets, which unfortunately for the school that I was in I felt quite exploited by the teachers, and I didn't feel like it was nurtured. I was quite smart, and so rather than kind of nurturing that, I was kind of just pushed to my limits to achieve the grades for the stats for the school. It was that kind of situation. And so, along with that and all the other things I was feeling, I developed quite severe anxiety. And that would show itself through panic attacks, insomnia. I had physical health symptoms as well. And that kind of just continued while I went into my A levels. So into sixth form, that got worse. I would have emotional outbursts in school. I was sent home from school by teachers or sent out of lessons because I didn't know how to cope. I didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do with me either, so they would just send me away. It kind of, again, I just didn't know what to do. And I went to university, I went to Bible college, and I would say from that point, I started to down spiral, because where I went to Bible college, it was quite a small campus. I'd say there was no more than 50 people there at a time. Everybody knew everybody. Everyone knew what was going on with everybody. And so because I didn't know what to do, I would often just lock myself away. My friends didn't know how to help me. I didn't know how to help myself. And so I would isolate myself. The food on campus wasn't great, and we learned earlier about the importance of food and what that does for your body. I wasn't getting good nutrients. There was quite a lack of pastoral care on campus, so there wasn't anybody to support me. There wasn't anybody I could go to. And so, I developed quite severe low mood, which then, eventually developed into a depression. And then as it hit lockdown, because I'm 23, so I graduated uni 2 years ago. So while I was in uni in my second year, We got married, and then in my third year, I had a mental breakdown, but all that came from a place of I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to cope anymore. Yeah.
So, I mean, thank you for your openness. We appreciate it in the room, don't we, that Hannah's being open with us this afternoon. And I suppose what I'm hearing is that sort of as the years went by, because you didn't really have a language for talking about your mental health or getting support that you needed, perhaps, things started to spiral and became really difficult for you, particularly as it hit lockdown. And I think it was a bit of a perfect storm, lockdown, I think, for a lot of people, because we found ourselves locked away and it was hard. I mean, let's talk a little bit about your relationship with God. So kind of, during this period, maybe around lockdown, what was your relationship with God like, and how was, what part has God had to play in your mental health journey?
So, as I said, I went to Bible college. So I became a Christian properly when I was about 18, and I decided that I wanted to give 3 years to God, learn more about Him, and stuff. And so that was it's always been something that's important to me. I've always been aware of God. And then when lockdown hit, everything stopped. So I'd kind of been running on all cylinders for a very, very long time. And then lockdown meant everything had to stop and I wasn't able to do anything anymore. And I want you to imagine if you're driving a car at full speed and then you hit the brakes, everything in the car is just going to fire forward, including yourself, and everything's just going to become a mess. And that's what happened. I wasn't able to, just keep going anymore and just keep trudging on and hope everything would be okay. Everything stopped. And luckily it was the break that I needed. And as I became quite unwell, lockdown gave me the time to help myself and get better and work on myself. And in that came God, because in those really low, really down and depressed days that I had, I would be on my own for long periods of time in the day. Joe was a frontline worker, working as a mental health support at the time. So he would be off at work for long periods. And so I would be on my own. And I didn't know what to do. I was left alone with my thoughts. I didn't have anybody around to kind of disprove those thoughts or to tell me that that's not right. That's not what God, that wasn't the truth. Those things that in my head I was thinking weren't right. And so the only thing I had in those moments was God. I would often, and I can remember it so vividly, I would lie curled up in bed, just sobbing, praying for God to take the feelings or to take me, to be honest, because I just couldn't deal with it anymore. There was nothing. I just knew that God had more for me. And so I thank God that I never, ever acted on those thoughts. I never, ever acted on those feelings that I had, because I knew that there was more in His will for me than what was going on in my head, and that what was going on in my head and those thoughts and those feelings I had weren't from Him. That wasn't what He had for me. And so, I never acted on it. And I would just pray, God, please stop this. Please help me. And so, God was always that one constant that I had. And I thank Him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know earlier on today, the three of us over breakfast were talking about the fact that sometimes God does move in a moment and He heals us and the miracle happens. And then for other people, and we never know why does one person get an immediate miracle and another person go on a journey of healing. But for you, Hannah, you very much have gone on a journey of recovering from that really rock bottom. So just tell us practically, what did you do? Because you could have just stayed in bed under the duvet. The miracle didn't happen in a moment. What did you do to start to turn things around with God's help?
Yeah. So the first thing I had to do was acknowledge what I was feeling. I had to acknowledge the feelings I was having and the thoughts, because I then had to recognize what they were in order to know what to do to fix them. So that was my first step. I then decided to seek help. So where we live, we're very fortunate to live just a mile away from a small independent mental health charity, like a community centre, but it's like a mental health place. And I used to walk past it every day and think, what's that? It kind of looks all a bit hippie. But I went in and I told them what I needed, and they for 3 months then I was offered one-to-one support, I was offered therapy, and I was offered different groups that I could attend. So it was things like just like craft groups or like small group meditations, very like just fun, light-hearted things that gave you either something to take your mind off what was going on, or it would help you, it would give you ways to cope. And like I said, I had a one-to-one support worker who I could share that 18 rated version with. And I also had professional counselling as well, who could help me work through, my deeper rooted issues. And that was what helped me. I also, something that was super important for me was routine. So as I said, I was led in bed all day. I didn't have any reason to get up. I didn't have any purpose or any drive in my day. I'd just finished university and I didn't know what to do with myself. And so I had to start implementing routine. So we're very fortunate to live across the road from the most beautiful park. And I set myself a 2 mile route, and I walked the same route every day. And on that route, I would stop in the same place and I would do my devotions. And I would do a little bit of a grounding meditation just to like help me be in the present moment. And I did that every day for a long time. I would also make myself to-do lists. I would make myself goals, and then just even tiny things that I knew I was going to do. So for example, go to my support appointment, and then I'd go and I could tick that off, and it gave me that sense of achievement. I had that sense of connection because I was seeing somebody, and I also enjoyed going as well. So yeah, it was just those little things that changed, and eventually I was able to build up some resilience, and I started volunteering as well. And something that I do want to point out quickly is that for me personally, seeking help in church wouldn't have been helpful at the time. So I know that as Christians, we can often feel that we should go to other Christians and we should do that. And for me personally, that at the time wouldn't have been helpful. So I grew up in church from a young age. My mum was a children and young persons pastor. So I'd learned like Sunday face was a thing. We go to church, we're happy at church, everything's fine at church, and that's who it was. And everyone just kind of had this like, happy face, and we're telling everybody we're fine and everything's okay. I couldn't really be vulnerable with people in church at the time. And so for me, I had to seek help outside of that. And so that's why I did that. And that's what helped me.
Yeah, so it's amazing because I suppose what struck me, Hannah, is you got to a point where you knew you had to do something. You had to ask for help, and you had to talk about how you were feeling, and then you had to implement some of those practical routines and structures that Joe was talking about. And I hear what you're saying, that at the time, perhaps some of the messages in church about, having your church face on meant it was a barrier for you to actually open up at church. But that turned around, didn't it? Because the very fact you're here, you're now serving in church on our wellbeing team and helping other people. So we've sort of come to the end of our time, but what's kind of a couple of last things that you'd want to say to everybody?
So quickly, as Julie said, I didn't initially seek help in church, but I eventually, when I started to pick up a bit and started to feel better in myself, I did take part in the wellbeing course that Julie came up with and that Joe takes part in running. And that for me was needed because it helped reconnect me and the idea of mental health with God. I'd for a long time, there wasn't an association between those two things. I didn't know that, or I had never considered that emotions were God-given and that God wanted me to feel those emotions. I'd always thought that's a bad thing, that I'm depressed, that means there's something wrong with me. But no, like God has given me those feelings, and He wants me to feel them. And so the wellbeing course taught me that, amongst so many other things, so many other coping strategies and ways for me to help myself. And you know what? Like, recovery is a journey. I'm very much still on that road to recovery. I still have down moments or down days. There are still things that trigger me or set me off, and I'm still learning those things about myself. But honestly, I think Joe would say, or people who knew me, like, things are so much better now. I'm now working, which I couldn't do 2 or 3 years ago. I couldn't get out of bed or take my medication. Never mind work. And now I'm in a job that I absolutely love, helping young people in their mental health. So yeah, things get better. It's good. God's good.
Oh, amazing. Let's give Hannah a massive round of applause. Wow. Thank you so much, Hannah. It's incredible.